Thank you very much for having me. It's so nice to see such a large crowd early in the morning. Must be the amazing breakfast and everything, So together, thank you very much for doing that. It is always very heartwarming when you want to hear your story, share your story, and there's a lot of people, especially Connecticut people, who are in the room to kind of listen. I'll start out with a brief history, and then I'll give you a little idea about what we did to build our brand and how it all started. In 1986, my father sees an ad in the paper that a flower shop's available for about $6,000. They're listed, but they were mostly selling equipment. The flower shop had gone out of business. And we looked at the flower shop, and I had worked at Faricelli's Flowers in West Haven, Connecticut, and Charlie Faricelli was probably one of the most amazing mentors and a boss who taught me early, and I used to deliver papers for him. And on those cold days, stopped in one day and said, "Are you looking to hire someone?" He goes, "How old are you?" I was 13. I said, "I'm 13." He goes, "I can't hire you." I said, "I'll do whatever. I'll work really hard." So I think one cold day, he felt sorry, and he ended up hiring me to water the plants or help the customers take flowers across to the cemetery. And I learned a lot, and fast forward 4 or 5 years, went from there to working for McDonald's and learned about systems. And McDonald's probably helped me the most in building a franchise company, and that kind of planted the seed that you can build something great because you read stories about Ray Kroc and how he started out with a single restaurant in Chicago. And he didn't really have the money in the beginning to do a lot of the things he wanted to do, but then he caught on to the franchising concept. So my father shows me this ad. We go to look at this shop. They're selling equipment for $6,000. We make a deal with the landlord to get the place. And it wasn't my parents because, my family was really not well-to-do back then. My parents immigrated from Pakistan back in '81. This is 5 years later. My father worked 2 jobs. He would work at Burger King part-time. He was a machinist by day. And I remember that he got a 25-cent raise, and he was very, very excited that he was going from $8 to $8.25. And I don't know how he raised 5 kids, and it's amazing what our grandparents and parents have done, the sacrifices they gave to give us what we have today. So he goes, "Can you run this flower shop? You think you can do it?" And I said, "Sure." It was one of those things you just didn't say no because you saw the condition and you saw the things that we were going through. Knew nothing about flowers. He thought because I worked at Faricelli's that I knew about flowers. I actually watered plants, and I moved them across to the cemetery and planted them for people. But got a book. The nice thing about the greatest thing, and I'm saying this because we're doing things overseas right now. We're registering companies and building companies. It took me probably about 15 minutes to register a company and to start something in Connecticut. Somebody told me about, in order to start a company, you have to go to the Secretary of State's office. And off I go to Hartford, and this amazing lady, first she got a kick out of 17-year-old walking in saying, "I want to register a business." And she goes, "Oh, do you, honey? Okay." So she goes, "Well, it's $120. And so I have whatever the number was, and she helped me with the whole thing. I registered the company, went back. Our neighbors, my father's boss, who got my father the machinist job, Bill and Denise Holberg, my father goes to Bill and Denise and says, my son's thinking about buying a flower shop, but we need some money. We need like $6,000. And this is what's incredible about people. He goes, "Oh, that sounds like a great idea. I'll give you $6,000. So he gives us the $6,000. We start the flower shop. 2 years later, I start my second store, and about 3 years later, our flower shops were doing about $1 million in sales. And what's the secret behind it? I knew nothing about flowers, and most of the people that are sitting in here, you may not be experts in what you do, but when you're good in business, you can apply those rules to almost anything. So what I knew about was hard work, and the most important thing I knew about was customer service. And at that time, didn't have any budget for marketing. And I've seen some people, including Sign Pro Peter here, seeing him build his enterprise with that amazing customer service that you call them up on a Saturday at 10 o'clock at night and say, "Peter, I need to do something." And he's like, "Well, I'll see you there tomorrow morning." So it was that type of things that the basis we built in the beginning. And along the way, there were just these amazing people that just were just so generous with their advice, so generous So the first, I knew nothing about weddings, and a customer that used to come into our shop every Friday to buy flowers for his wife, for his girlfriend, said, I'm getting married and I want you to do the wedding. And I was honest with him. I said, I've never done a wedding. I don't know how wedding. He goes, oh, kid, it can't be hard. Figure it out. So he sends his girlfriend, but he goes, don't tell my girlfriend or my mother-in-law that. Pretend you know a lot about it. So off I go, I get books, and I sit down with them, and it turned out to be one of the biggest orders, a very big family. But that little encouragement, that little kind word, and at the end, I'm kind of feeling bad that it's going to be a lot of money. And he meets with me, and I said, well, it's like $1,500. He goes, I figured it'd be a little more than that. And at those days, we didn't have money. So all the things were, you had to pay cash. When you went to the wholesalers, you had to pay cash. And I didn't ask him for a deposit or anything. And he's just walking and goes, you probably need some money for a deposit? How much deposit do you want? I said, well, I've never done a wedding before. I was kind of feeling bad. And he gives me like $700, $800. And he goes, no, that little gesture, that's that kindness. That's the thing that made us kind of excel. So fast forward, 1999, we start East Haven. In East Haven, our flower shops are doing really well. We're up to 3. We bought a building in Hamden. We run a flower shop out of there. The idea of edible arrangement started. We started playing around with it in 1997. And again, the same thing. Didn't really have a proper business plan, didn't really have an understanding where the brand would go, went across to banks to try to get a loan. Majority of the banks, denied it, and then it makes sense. Here's somebody who's running flower shops, and now it's thinking that they're going to build this great business out of cutting fruit and putting it on sticks and stick it in baskets and selling it to people. So that's kind of how they saw it. They said, well, our underwriting looked at this, and we really don't think that this has viability in the long run. And and I've always said that I am surrounded by some of the most amazing women, my wife and my mother, who passed away in 2005. Just when the company that she kind of laid the foundation for was just taking off, I went home and I'm really, really disappointed that I'm not getting the money. And there was a family friend, and the one very important thing that you have to do when you're building a business is you have to have a circle of people who are above you, who are bigger than you, who have already traveled. And it's so important that that's the people you pick out. And most of them will give you half hour or 15 minutes of time. They will not give you more than that. Most of them that I've Fred DeLuca, from Subway, I would get about an hour a year with him. And that hour a year was probably worth what we would pay millions of dollars in consulting fees for. Literally would sit, and he'd have lunch with me. We'd sit in Milford, and he would pick the place. And he would say, if he said, oh, I'm in Ohio, I'm like, I'll be right there. So, because that was the teacher. That's the teacher, and that's the shadow of who I want to sit under. So having those people as you're building a great brand and as you want to build, because those are the people that are inspiring you. And there are 2 times they help. One, when you have an idea and you want to do something and it's not really working. Another is when things look like they're going to fail, and when you talk to them and they give you a story about, yeah, that happened to us in '86. I went through that. Couldn't make the bills, couldn't do that. But just hang on. Watch what happens in another 6 months or something. And that's exactly what would happen because they've traveled that road. So I went to, similarly, again, someone who's built a brand. I didn't listen to that advice at that time when I was starting Edible. I went to someone who had never built a business, was a professor at a university and a family friend, and I showed him what I was going to do. My father actually invited him, so I showed him what to do, and he goes, well, why would somebody buy that? Doesn't even make sense. No one's done it. And I said, exactly, no one's done it. No one's doing it. He goes, yeah, but that doesn't mean you'll be successful. And stick to your flower business. That same night, I made an arrangement. I took it home and I put it on the dining room table that I'm thinking about doing this, but everybody's telling me that it's going to really be difficult. It may not work. My mother looks at it and says, honey, this is going to be really, really big. Just stick to it. So at that point, the greatest lesson I learned at that point was that when you have an idea and your customers are telling you that it's working, your customers are telling you that, and when everybody else says it's not going to work, listen to your customer. So whenever we would put the arrangement in front of a customer, somebody would get a delivery, the reaction of the customer would be, wow, this is great. Oh, I usually don't get a call back when I send them something. And people called me and said, where'd you get this? And so it's working great. So then we started to self-finance. We couldn't, I couldn't get funding when I did the first store. So we built a small 600 square foot store on the side of the flower shop in East Haven, Connecticut, kind of laid the floor down ourselves and everything. And it kind of grew from there. Opened our second store in Norwalk, Connecticut about a year later. Same thing, applied to great customer service, focus on that. It was probably December 2002, just when we were opening our second store, that customers would come in the winter, and this became our mission statement. And I really believe in these little corny things, and they work very well. And in your businesses, you have to have them. There has to be this element of non-sophistication, just that natural conversation type of a thing. A customer walked in and said, I want to order a certain number of these for holiday gifts and everything, but the pineapple isn't really good in the winter. I usually don't find it to taste that good. How are you going to make sure that the fruit is really good? And I said something to him. I said, I'm going to guarantee you a wow, that if you don't get a wow, I'll give you all your money back, no questions asked. And he goes, really? I said, dude, no problem. And then that became our mission statement, that we will wow you in all aspects of it. So as we're building the brand and as you're building your businesses, one of the most important things that I've hung on to that up to now, I've hired some really, really smart people. And along the way, they wanted to change the mission statement because they thought it was too simple. And they want to make something that to better the community, to better the environment, to make a culture that is this or that. And that those simple 3 words everybody believed in, because whenever we do something with our franchisee, it has to be about a wow. When a customer receives it, it has to be about a why. When a customer complains, it has to be about a wow. So, we kind of went through this roller coaster ride that as different people would come into my organization, and I always give my team members a lot of flexibility, that they would always want to change that mission statement. And because it's too simple, it doesn't really speak for the diversity or the scope of things that we do, but we've always stuck to it, and as long as we've stuck to it, it's done well. So it started off from that customer saying, guaranteeing the customer that it will be a wow. And that's what's built us along the way. And what are some of the things that in business, that we were blessed to be able to do? One thing in edible, as we started edible, before I started edible, I was in the flower business since '86 to about 2004. And then at the same time, I had an IT company that I started back in 1988. I just wanted to put a computer in my one of my businesses. Found it to be very expensive, and I wanted to learn it. And I always liked computers, and started a small little company on the side, which took off, and which I sold in 1997. Went into edible. But when I did edible, I had learned something that I saw Apple do, and I tell people it's the kind of the ecosystem effect. Majority of us take that prime part of our life when we're working really hard. I mean, most of you, as you've built your businesses, you work these unrelentless hours. I mean, just crazy hours that are just not possible. And my mother used to say that, honey, by 40, you have to be done. Meaning you have to have built your businesses, because after that, you won't have the energy you have up to 40. And I used to believe, I'd sleep like 3 hours and work 7 days a week. And she was so right. As you go over 40, it's that intensity isn't there anymore. So the one thing that we did at that point was, whenever we wanted to start a brand, or whenever we wanted to do any kind of a business that required supply chain, required technology, we would build it ourselves. And then I saw Apple do this when Steve Jobs came back into Apple, that he built his whole thing, including when he originally did Apple, he built it where he would build a device and build things right around that device that supported that device, and everything had to support that device, and he made money from everything that supported. So if it was music, he got a cut from the music. If it was credit card clearing now, they get a cut from credit card clearing. So they started to do some of these things. I think most business people, that's where we sell ourselves short. That's where we don't spend a little more sophistication to say, how are these channels? How do I connect these channels and build a bigger business? And as I started to get into these, our business started to get bigger, and you see some of these other organizations, that's what they do. They own their supply chain that that is importing from China. So we started a company. We needed to make machinery and needed to make equipment. So our baskets have to be food safe, because we put fruit in them, and people are going to be eating it. Majority of the floral products were not food safe. They were made for flowers. So we started going off to China. And Asma, on my first trip, Asma went with me. That was actually our honeymoon. She thought we were going on a honeymoon, but we were going to go check out factories. And so off we go to China. We're visiting factories in these remote areas to buy. But it was nothing. The business was, we were mostly trying to source baskets. Today, that business is about a $60 million company. And it started out with just simply buying containers, but mugs. And it turned into machinery and turned into other things. IT company, we have an IT company we started where we wanted to have some custom software that defines the intellectual property for the company. So as we have some of the things, as we're going to work hard and as we're going to build these processes, we want to own the processes. We want to own the intellectual property, so that way as we duplicate and as we build the bigger system, they're buying the know-how. Majority of the people I saw, they would be in a store, so I had all these customers when I had the IT company for the flower shops, where the person would be working in that single flower shop at the same spot. I would meet them 2 years, when I installed their computer system, you go 2 years later, and they would be standing in the same spot doing the same exact thing 2 years later, even though they had wealth of knowledge that they should be using to build a large enterprise, to build a company, and that's where they should be spending the energy. So we started to build the technology. So the technology, every process that we did, the technology would define, so then when we would duplicate this to another franchisee, they didn't have to figure the basis out. So if you have an insurance company, there's all these processes and all these customizations that you do, some unique things to you. And you're not going to be there to be able to manage this. So I knew that one day I'm not going to be here. I'm going to give this system off to someone in Massachusetts or Atlanta. I just want them to follow a system. So it's literally, and that's what I learned from McDonald's. When you walked into McDonald's, they used to call it Mick Thank You. Most of us didn't say thank you. They would train you to say thank you. And I would go home, and my mother's like, you're being so nice these days. What's going on? My brothers would give something, or somebody would hand you water, like, thank you. It's like, wow, what happened to you? And it was McDonald's training you to say thank you and to turn the bag a certain way, on how to load a bag. So a lot of these systems that you're developing in your company, this is intellectual property that you own, that is marketable, that you can go out and market. So as we built a POS system in Edible, and it was customized to Edible, we started to sell that POS systems to other companies. As we built a back office system, we started to sell that off to another company. As we built the supply chain, we started to hire people to sell that off and everything. So it was really, and it forced me to stay out of the weeds, to let other people take over steps instead of me staying into it. That concept of that flower shop owner standing in that flower shop thinking that if I don't make this bouquet for Mrs. Smith, it's not going to be as good. Mrs. Smith won't be happy. So it's more of a psychological thing that was a barrier on his side. It wasn't necessarily what the customer saw, where in that prime time and in that prime portion of running your business that you can build a large enterprise. So the theory that came to me and the consultants that told me how to build a business in the beginning was grow out. If you build your first edible arrangement store in Connecticut, build a second one in Massachusetts. Now, I wish I had that luxury. We were desperate for money back then. So when somebody came to us from California and said, I want to open a store in California, and we said, sure, let's do it. It was a lot of hard work. You had to turn around, and now you had somebody very far away. You had to travel, and you had to kind of train them the system. But it's the best thing we ever did. As soon as we opened a store in California, everybody around California in that area started to buy more stores. As we would put one in Atlanta, everybody in that market. So and now especially, and it doesn't take us long to get anywhere. So we started out in East Haven, Connecticut, started franchising in 2001. And the franchising was an accident as well. How did we get to franchising? We couldn't get financing from the banks for the things we wanted to do. Wanted to build corporate stores, $200,000 per store. Couldn't get it, but then people would come to us and say, hey, I really like this concept. I'd like to open a store. And I remember Chris Delamarche from Waltham, Mass. He walks into our store. We're very busy kind of making the arrangements and doing the deliveries. And the girl says, there's somebody in the front. He wants to talk to you. So I walk to and this is very important. It's a very important lesson, actually. So I walk up to the front. I got my apron on, and I'm just in the middle of finishing an arrangement in the back. And I walk up, and he goes, hi, I was at my mom's house, and I saw this arrangement. I really love this concept. I'd like to open a store. We were just basically trying to survive with a 600 square foot store making about 30 arrangements a day. So, of course, being the business people that we are, I can, wonderful. We've been thinking about franchising. Excellent. I'll have my lawyer, I didn't have a lawyer, I'll have my lawyer draft up the agreements right away, and we will be back to you maybe tomorrow. So I call out my lawyer and I said, I want a franchise. He goes, no, it's much more complicated than that. You can't just turn on and do this. And same thing, looked up back then, Yellow Pages. That was the Google back then. So looked up in the Yellow Pages, West Hartford, Connecticut, Miceli, one of the top franchise consultants in the country, sitting home. I call him up. He picks up the phone, gives me about an hour. He doesn't remember he gave me an hour. And I think he got a kick out of me calling him, telling him I'm trying to build a big franchise company. So I call him up and said, somebody walked into my store. He goes, what do you do? And I'm trying to explain. And it's really hard to explain if somebody hasn't seen the product. As soon as I said the word edible arrangements, he thought it was that kinky stuff, edible underwear and stuff. He goes, you really want to franchise that? I said, no, it's all fruit. It's cut pieces of fruit. And he goes, okay. So, and websites weren't really big yet. So I explained it to him. He listens for about a half hour. And he goes, kid, I think you got a really good idea. And I think you're going to do well. I like your energy. I like your focus. I like where you're going. I'm too expensive for you. Mine, I would charge you about $125,000. Any consultant that you get will be between $50,000 to $125,000. I'm on the top end, and you really can't afford me, but you seem like you have the energy to figure this thing out on your own. So he goes, it's really not hard. Call up the state that you want to go register in and get the documents and go build it. Best piece of advice I ever got. I tell people this now, and they think I'm crazy. I actually called up Rhode Island. Mr. Steele was his name, who was I think it's called franchise law. He was head of the business section that registered franchise companies. And I told him what I want to do. And he said, well, yeah, normally we deal with lawyers, but I see what you're talking, just get this document ready and send it to me. We put together the document, sent it to him. Like 3 weeks later, I had the whole company registered, start doing franchising. Now, that was only used for our first 10 deals because when I finally could afford a lawyer, he looked at it, he goes, you can't use this document. I said, well, it worked really well for the first 10. So the objective was that I had someone, we're going to franchise, but in the process of putting together that document, I learned everything about franchising. Majority of us look at contracts, and it happens now. I mean, now I have GCs and people that work for me, but that created the habit of every contract I would look at, and every section I would understand why. And then when I sat with some franchisee and they would say, we don't like this section, I knew exactly what it was about, and I would tell them that, I'm sorry, I'm not going to negotiate that. I've put together an agreement that both parties can deal with, but this is the final agreement. And most of them would be surprised that I know so much about it, but that's what kind of taught me about franchising. So doing that, one, don't ever dream of building a Google, because that, statistically, the odds are against you in building such a great brand. But always build an amazing individual business, that business that you have, like focus on building a great, local business, a small business, great service, great product. And I used to have this rule that if a customer complains, you should give back money faster than you took it. So if it took you 3 minutes to take the order, it should take you 3 seconds to say, I'm sorry, where would you like me to give the credit to you? In franchising, it's really hard now because we have 1,200 franchisees, and a lot of them will start to struggle with that, to say, no, we didn't think the product was right. We think the customer's trying to take advantage of us. And I used to always have a rule, let them take advantage of you. Just measure it. Let a certain amount of customers take advantage of you. There's nothing wrong with that. That price of you arguing with the wrong customer is much heavier. You're going to pay a lot for that, so always give the money back faster. Always have this standard, because a lot of your people, our team members, try to protect us. So they'll turn around and say, well, this customer called and she said the pineapple wasn't good, even though the pineapple has been great. And they're trying to protect you, say, well, I don't want them to take advantage of us. So you almost have to do that training. So I do a monthly thing with my team to kind of remind them of why we're here. It's the franchisees why we're here. It's the customers of why we're here. There is no other reason for us to be here, that if they didn't buy from us, we would not be here. We wouldn't do any of these things. So these little speeches, what most people used to tell me, you give these corny speeches, they worked really well, or having the 5 Ps. So, as you saw, the product, places, purpose. Every company and every business has a purpose. So we've always started out that our promise, number 1, is to wow you. Then it's our people, then it's our places, then it's our products. And at the end, there's a purpose. And in franchising, I started to realize that our franchisees, when they would take our brand, a lot of them would be very profit-oriented. And this, again, I learned from my mom. Back when I was about 18, I would struggle. I would come home and there was never enough business. There was never enough things. You couldn't pay the electric bill. You weren't really paying yourself enough. And I would come home and she would see me kind of really stressed out. And she said, "What's wrong?" So, well, I didn't really make that much sales today. Or this holiday came up, Valentine's Day came up, and it snowed. We had to throw most of the product away. We're not gonna survive. And she said, and some of you may have heard me say this before, she said one of the greatest things that changed me forever. She said, "Honey, don't run after money because it runs really fast. But go do the right thing and go take care of the customer and it'll chase you." So at the end of it, when you get into a transaction, don't think of profit. Think of how you can take care of that person. Think of how you can make it amazing for them. Just think of it from their point of view and watch how money chases you. And after that, I totally changed. I never really worried about, because I see a lot of people struggle. They won't update their sign. It's a plug for you, Peter. They won't update their sign every few years because they're thinking, I want to save a little money. They won't freshen up their store. They won't freshen up the retail area. They won't even freshen up their offices every few years. But it's a great thing when you do this, when you focus on trying to take care of the environment, trying to take care of where people are, to try to give a great presentation to the customers when they're coming back to you, because some of them may be visiting you for the 5th or 6th or 7th time. So doing that upgrade, doing that refresh is very, very important, and that's where that struggle is. Oh, why should I spend that money? I don't see a direct return on this. Where I went to Nordstrom's and they were saying something like at the Westfield that they're spending something like $54 million. And I thought their store looked pretty good before even the $54 million was spent. So they'll spend a lot of time, a lot of money on trying to do these upgrades and everything. So the same thing in our business is that reset button. So what made us kind of grow and do, because anytime Tom Peters, I went to an Inc., we won, I think we were like number 10 on Inc. 4000 one year, and they invite you to this event, and Tom Peters was speaking. And Tom Peters turned around and he says, look, there are 2 types of people. There are people that their destination is to climb the mountain, and it's always the peak that they're focused on. Then there are others that go base camp to base camp. So they'll start something either in their careers or in their businesses. They'll start something just when the difficulty comes, the air gets thinner, more effort is required for them to reinvent themselves. They'll just go back to the previous one and start something new all over again. And he goes, well, the reality of it is that if your destination is the climbing this mountain or getting to the peak, then all these, as you get higher, it's only going to get harder and harder, and you have to reinvent yourself every single time. And what I found is that your business gets to a certain point, your brand gets to a certain point where people start to celebrate. I used to call it 1,000-store syndrome. That when we got to 1,000 stores, everybody's writing stories about us and they're telling us how great we are. And we all started to believe how great we are. And it started to, kind of complacency start to set in. At that time is when you, as the owner of the business or as the leader, you have to go and hit the reset button. And you have to, and Fred DeLuca told me a great story. He goes, they had 700 stores, and he walked into his corporate headquarters, and he said, well, he got everyone together, and they had just done 700, getting to maybe 1,000, and he goes, I told everyone we're going to have 5,000 stores. And he said, everybody thought I had lost it. They thought I was crazy that we hardly got to 700. How is it that we're going to get to 5,000? They have 40,000 stores right now. That's the restaurants they ended up building. So what is that number? That's the type of reset. So every year, that's what I do. Every year, I sit with my team and we set the goal for next. Now, Does that mean statistically that everything you've hit? No, we've had a lot of failures. We've missed a lot, but it's fun. It's fun trying that. And it's fun going through that. 2 years ago, we went through a total reinvention of our team, which probably was the hardest thing. We brought in a whole new team because at the end of it, we owe it to our customers and we owe it to our franchisees because they have invested in our business for the future, not for what we're doing today. And most of our business partners are with us because they're planning things in the future of growing their enterprises. So hitting that reset button, looking at it, doing a logo refresh, doing a marketing refresh, which majority of you do, but doing it with that mission of building something big. We never thought we would get to 1,200. I thought maybe 100 stores, 50 stores, 75 stores, something of that. But when we did the first 5 or 10 right, we got to 500 real quickly because it was easy to replicate at that point, and people saw the success of it and everything. So very systematic, following systems. I'm not saying avoid debt. I'm saying be careful with debt. Being very, very careful with debt. And we have to return this back to the next generations that getting money or having money doesn't necessarily mean you need it. You won't really learn to be creative. And I'm mostly going out there telling people, no, try to avoid it as much as you can, then use it right to really grow, to springboard, but don't use it for bases and everything, which was the tradition in our family. My grandfather, he was the one person who would just never get debt. And if he got debt, every day he would sit there saying, oh, we owe so-and-so money. Oh, we owe so-and-so money. I have to pay so-and-so. And he wouldn't let anybody in the family buy stuff. It's like, no, if they came by and they saw this new thing in the house, they would think they haven't paid me, but they bought that new. So it was an amazing tradition to say, protect it. And not only that, if the economy suffers, you will be able to survive through it because you really don't owe money and live within your means and everything. So the refresh of the marketing, the refresh of the brand, and I call it the reset button. And along the way, where is it now and where are we kind of going? We've been blessed to hire some amazing team members within the last 2 years. We continue to have great growth, but it gets to a point where we're now more of a solid growth. We're more focused on our stores, not necessarily focused on trying to build 2,000 stores or 4,000 stores, but having whatever the 1,200, 1,300, or 1,400 stores, but having solid 1,400 stores, making sure the tradition or what made us successful, the wow and a lot of these things that made us successful, does not get lost. Because that's what we started to see a few years ago, that people started to lose what made us what we are and what the true the formula for success was. So a lot of energy towards that. The growth continues. The state has, this state and the community in this state has just been amazing to us. I mean, he's a son of an immigrant where we arrive with hardly anything, go into a Secretary of the State at 17, register a company, and then 30 years later have an enterprise that's doing about $560 million a year. Every moment I count my blessings, I couldn't be thankful enough for everything that has happened. And I've had great mentors. So all of you, this is an amazing event. I mean, these are the type of events I used to go to. I used to learn a lot. So inspire other people, kind of what we could do, tell them that it's passing on the baton so they don't have to go figure everything out. And then the other thing is just encourage. When you find people and somebody's doing a business, encourage them. Just if it wasn't for Paul Muldoon or Denise and Bill Holtberg saying, oh, flower shop at 17, that sounds like a great idea. Here's $6,000. I wouldn't be here today. It's their encouragement, or Fred DeLuca sitting there saying, hey, I think you're onto something big. You're going to do really good. Just avoid this and do things this way. So that's been the formula of the success more than anything. It's been the people in our lives and everything. And then, of course, I can never forget, we work very hard. We're running around. It's really the magic of the blessings of the amazing ladies, and especially my wife, who's behind me on everything. It's the person you come home to, and you kind of share the really rough day, who saves you from jumping off the cliff. It says, no, it's okay. It's okay. Or the opposite, where I say, I think I'm done. That's it. I don't need to do this anymore. She goes, oh, you're not going to sit still anyway, so might as well keep it going. So it's those encouragements and that support. So thank you very much for having me. It's been a great journey. I wish you all the greatest of success. And don't short sell yourself. Don't you know, there's a limited time we have. Make a mark. You know, if you have a great business, don't let it die with you, right? You know, build it into something, build it into an enterprise that is on its own, and hand it off to people. Let other people. What I've done is I have a great idea. When I tell other people about it and kind of inspire them, they do better than what I could ever do. They run with it, you know, and then I'm just doing the encouragement. So look at some of the things that you're doing in the businesses, and don't ever think that you can't build a 1,000-store chain. You know, with this little thing that some of the people help me do, we employ close to 10,000 people. We create, you know, jobs, and these are businesses that we have up to 800 franchisees, 700 franchisees who have built 2, 3, 5 stores all over the country, all over the world. So that's what's inspiring, and we as business owners, that's what we like seeing. It's not sometimes the money, it's the business. It's seeing the thrill of actually growing the business and seeing where it goes and what we're able to do and everything. So thank you for letting me share my story, and thank you for everything. And thank you for attending so early in the morning, and I'll take some questions now. Excellent, I did a great job. All right.
Tariq, have you been able to profit off of your waste stream?
Well, we just launched, so we really don't have any waste when it comes to you know, throwing away fruit. There is a certain amount of fruit that comes in. We buy premium fruit. We have to buy premium fruit, so we're paying a lot of money for it. So that's where Edible to Go came in. So we launched the concept about 3-4 years ago, where we started to take the fruit that we couldn't use in the arrangements, and we would use that in smoothies, and we would use that in chocolate dipped and other things, and fruit salads. Now, a lot of times the pineapple, when we cut a daisy, the best part we were throwing away, because the pineapple is sweeter on the outside. You know, it gets kind of a little harder towards the center of it. So we were able to do a lot of that. And then, you know, I tell you, the magic was that our franchisees at that time started sending fruit to the soup kitchens. So they would cut the fruit up and they would send it to the soup kitchens. And what we found was a lot of the soup kitchens didn't have fruit. They would have other things but never had fruit. So that's where a lot of the journey, and that's where a lot of the fruit ends up going. You know, taking it home, I guess, you know, some of the employees. But then now with Edible to Go, we have these really, there aren't too many smoothie concepts or yogurt concepts where there's real fruit blended, and we whip our yogurt. We don't actually, it's not a machine that we're getting a processed yogurt. We whip it. We'll put the fruit juice in it and make whatever flavor you want, and it's all fresh juice from that day. So it's very unique. So we've been able to do all those things and never really had an issue, because we're getting fruit every other day or every day. So it's all on demand, and we get the orders, we make the orders, and we deliver. So you're never really making anything extra that you have to throw away. Please.
Your 1,200 franchises, have they always been successful? Is one time doing well, one doing bad?
You always have, for whatever reason, the one thing I learned that as we go into businesses, as you go into franchising, not everybody comes with the same mindset. You get a lot of people who come in as investors, and that when they come in as investors, their stores don't tend to do that well. We're very much on occasion. You know, there's a celebration, there's a reason why the customer's calling you. You have to get very involved. It's not where you just stock it and people buy it. There is a part of parties and events. So you always have a certain percentage of turnover, you know, and you measure that percentage. Our percentage is probably around less than 1%. There's always a 1 to 2% sometime. Our first store failure was in 2008. So we had up to about 800 stores when we lost our first store in 2008. So at that point, there was a bit of a domino effect because of, mostly because of personal finances. People were overextended on financing, and they had done a lot, and the stores got shut down with that as foreclosures happened. So, we built the model from the beginning where people have to focus on individual profitability. And as you go towards franchising, or you start to give your license, your concept over, that has to be very, very important. That how do you make a profit? What is it that you're going to do? So majority of the time we have to stop people from doing stuff than having them do stuff. So they'll want to add a new product. they're not thinking inventory, they're not thinking what that's going to do to the costs. So we have to stop them from doing stuff more than having them do new stuff and everything. So there's always a certain amount of failure. There's always a certain amount of risk. We've done well. Our best years, believe it or not, so I launched it in 1999, and everybody thought it wouldn't really work when the economy goes bad. So then in 2001, the economy went bad. It was our best 2 years, but we only had like 7 stores. Fast forward 2008, our best years were 2008, 9, 10. Biggest growth. Why? Number one, we weren't levered, so we didn't have a lot of debt. So as you see downturns, we can invest the money, and I believe in cash and believe in cash big. So I am, from investors' point of view, I'm very careful on distributions because I rather use the money that's on hand, and save it for those downturns when the economy is going to get soft, that you double down. So what we did at that point was we launched a TV campaign in 2008. We started to spend about $17 million to go out and do advertising, but the consumers, they wanted something of value. So instead of sending flowers, they started looking, so at least they can eat it. It looks like flowers. It has a little better value. The family can enjoy it. And as our biggest growth, was 2008, 2009. And that worked. I mean, it worked in 2000, 2001, and the same thing worked in 2008, 2009. But you have to prep for it. You have to plan for that. So now we're looking at the next downturn. And you have to plan for it. What is it exactly we're going to do? What's the risk? How much do we need to put aside for that to get through it? And including some stores that we would have that they need help because they're financially in trouble or they're going to be failing. How do you prop up the stores to continue it and everything? Please. Well, it's been done. The credit goes to a lot of people. It's been done for a long time. But no one really did it at a retail level. So what possessed me was that I did not see growth in the floral industry. So I was in the floral business. I dreamed of building 1,000 flower shops all over the country. And it just wasn't working because the people wanted something different. People wanted a different experience. And then the whole momentum of chocolate and the food was going towards healthy, and people were getting away from sending, so you would you could send flowers, you could send a pyramid fruit basket back then, or you could send a basket of chocolate. And we started to hear people where customers started to say, oh no, she's, there are people in the house who can't have sugar, or I don't think she would want to eat chocolate. So when we saw that, that's when it all made sense that this is going to be big down the road from a business point of view. But at the same time, we had to build a whole model. It was really difficult in the beginning. When you have to build something, and if you see a clean slate that no one is doing it, most people shy away from that because it's hard. But at the same time, if you build that model and build that business, there's a barrier to entry, so it's going to prevent others from coming into it. You lay down the foundation and you're kind of the expert in it. So from that point, that's what excited me at the beginning. And that's why I went against the trend of everyone telling me it won't work, that I knew that if I could build it and get to about 100 stores, this will be magical. And I had predicted in 5 years we would do 50 stores. We built 500 in 5 years, the first when we started franchising. Please.
You mentioned earlier that even the customer complaint experience has to be about wow.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more about that? Everybody gets complaints at some point. How do you make that a wow?
So majority of the companies, now I'll tell you, it's becoming, and you may experience this when you go to one of our stores, it's really, really difficult to get small business owners to be very focused. And I used to be the same way before my mom, kind of said that, when she said that stop chasing money, that you want to kind of argue with the customer because you worked so hard and every penny counts, every dollar counts, and you feel like somebody's being unreasonable. And I used to have this thing in the beginning that people would always say, we don't have that many complaints. And I would tell them, well, stop. Why are you worried about complaints? How many compliments do you have? So my thing was that don't worry about complaints. If you're managing compliments, you'll never have complaints. So if your objective is that a customer must compliment you when you're doing something, you're making something, you must hear a wow, You know, if that's the objective you train your customer service people and your employees at, that your mission is to beg a compliment. I used to tell people, they say, well, a lot of people don't, when the experience is good, they don't tell you anything. I said, call them and beg. Tell them that my job depends on it, my raise depends on it, please. So if you create that culture, so people would turn around and they would at the end of it say, you know, I hope I gave you good service. And a lot of companies do it, and they do a really good job at it. If a service was good, please send in a compliment, or you're going to get this one question, a survey. I hope you answer it correctly. So once you create that culture, you really don't have to worry about complaints. And so it's always been that. And then when you do get the complaint, you're turning it into a compliment. You want the customer to say, well, I called and I had a bad experience, but they took care of me. They went above and beyond. So, you know, our thing used to be, I'm going to give you credit on your credit card. Who can I send an arrangement to? Well, but you gave me my money back. That's right. But that has nothing to do with you getting the edible arrangements experience. But who can we send it to? Can we send it to someone else? I know that person isn't there, you know, and then and the person would walk away with a wow. Now, as you get to 1,200 stores and you get 800, 900 small business owners, it becomes very, very difficult. But the way we do it is to say, we measure you by your compliments, not by your complaints. Because if we're measuring your compliments, you're never really going to have complaints. And then, you know, so it's really just the culture you set within your store. And you have to have a conversation. I used to call it a Thursday pep talk. Every Thursday I would go in and kind of get on my soapbox and do a pep talk. Talk about how many compliments did we get. You know, look at that, you know, Mrs. Smith, I would pick a customer. Mrs. Smith spent $163 with us this week. That is, you know how long it takes to make $163? Can any of you, and she spent $163 with us. I mean, is that amazing or what? And you know, you kind of go through that speech every week, and after a while, people catch on, and that's what the people are doing. And usually, they deliver better than what you even expect because they go above, and you're empowering them. You're empowering them to say, no, do not worry about complaints. It's not how you manage complaints. This is how you manage compliments. And that's what these, and I'm inspired by Nordstroms. I've been testing Nordstroms for about 20 years now, where I want them to once not go around the counter and give me my bag. Find one person who hands me my bag over the counter. And this is something set by John Nordstrom, that you must walk around the counter and hand the customer the bag. It hasn't happened to me, and maybe one of you would see it one of these days. There's a great story. He was giving a talk at one of his stores and telling everybody about a great customer service. One of the people who was just a little overzealous manager who's trying to protect the brand, she turns around and she goes, well, Mr. Nordstrom, a lot of people buy the dresses or buy the things and then they return them afterwards. He goes, it's okay, give them credit. Don't worry about it. She goes, but people take advantage and everything. So he kept going, and at the end he goes, honey, am I asking you to give them my money or your money? And she goes, of course, Mr. Nordstrom, it's your money. She goes, honey, give it. You know, so it's really setting that type of protocol and great customer service. Anyone else? Great, thank you very much. It was an honor.